The TCU defense has improved the last couple of weeks, but we'll get a good chance to see how much they've improved against an SMU team that's going to spread them out, take shots down the field, try to isolate matchups in a similar way to what Colorado tried to do against TCU in week one. We'll talk about that and more next here on Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's try to get to 950 by Saturday. Let's see if we can do that. We had a nice little uptick in subscribers yesterday. Let's see if we can get to 950 before that SMU game kicks off at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Tomorrow, Matt Jennings will be on the show. I'm excited to talk to him about the game against Houston and more. But it's Iron Skillet week. It's time to play SMU. And the TCU defense has improved the last couple weeks. And that might be an understatement. They have not given up a touchdown in 8 quarters of play. And I understand, Nickel State, Houston seems like they have issues on offense. If you kind of watch the people that cover the Cougars and what Dana Holgerson's saying, he doesn't seem to be taking a lot of responsibility for their issues on offense. And so there's some hand-wringing going on there. But they did a really nice job. I think Donovan Smith's a good quarterback. Samuel Brown and Matthew Golden are weapons. You saw what Matthew Golden did on that kick return. So to hold them out of the end zone, I feel like that was a significant accomplishment by that defense. They've been really good against the run this year. And really since Joe Gillespie got there, that's something that they've improved a lot on. That 2021 team struggled so much against teams that just ran the ball downhill and, use that power running game. And TCU's done a great job against the running game all year long. But they're facing a team this week in SMU that is going to do similar things and run similar concepts like Sean Lewis did at Colorado, where they're going to spread the Frogs out. They're going to be in more obvious passing situations. They're going to try to isolate their athletes against, members of the secondary, especially the safeties and the linebackers, and try to create big plays. And so I feel like this week is going to be a good barometer, a good test for this defense and how they move forward. SMU scored 69 points against Prairie View A&M last week. It was an FCS game. They were obviously, better than Prairie View A&M and took advantage of that. They only scored 11 points against Oklahoma. Only had a couple touchdown drives in that ball game. Oklahoma defense seems much improved in year 2 of the Brett Venables experience. And they scored 38 points against Sonny Cumbie's La Tech team in their season opener. Preston Stone is their quarterback this year. Preston was highly recruited out of high school. This is his first year as a full-time starter. 798 yards, 62% completion percentage, has 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, has only been sacked 1 time. So this offensive line has held up pretty well so far for SMU, and they've done a nice job of protecting him against their first few opponents of the season. From a receiving standpoint, it's kind of intriguing. Nobody has really taken the reins yet and been their clear go-to guy. Jake Bailey leads the team in receptions and yardage. He's got 13 receptions for 136 yards. Hasn't found the end zone yet, but he had 230 yards receiving last year. He transferred in from Rice, and so he's been there at SMU for a few seasons. A name that many of you will know and will recognize immediately. He's not the most popular person in Fort Worth, Texas. Jordan Hudson is now on this SMU team and didn't really play, hasn't really made a huge impact yet. He does have 2 touchdowns on the year, but he has 5 catches for 109 yards, had 2 catches for 72 yards against La Tech in their first game, and then had 3 catches for 37 yards against Prairie View A&M. Did not record any stats in that Oklahoma game. But Jordan Hudson, he was, as a true freshman, somebody who made an impact for TCU last year, went in the portal, I believe, right immediately after the season. Then the next day he was out of the portal and didn't have the best spring camp, ends up going in the portal before fall camp. But he's a talented player. I know TCU fans don't love the way he handled all that. I understand that. But he's a talented guy. I know that Josh Newton and I'm sure Avery Helm and Mason White, Channing Candace, and those guys that, well, mainly Newton and Helm, since they were there during the spring, had some chances to go up against Jordan and probably have a pretty good field for what he wants to do. I imagine this is a game that's pretty personal for him. So we'll see what plays out there. But they've spread the ball around a lot early in the season. They really don't have one guy besides Bailey that they've been using a ton in the passing game. And then from a rushing standpoint, I talked earlier about how TCU's held up really well against the run game. LJ Johnson has 153 yards rushing. He's their leading rusher. Jalen Knighton actually has more carries. He's got 32 for 140 on the season. But the main reason that I think this is going to be a good test for this TCU defense is what I talked about earlier. Rhett Lashlee, they're going to go tempo. They're going to hurry things up. And Rhett's a guy that's not afraid to take shots down the field, whether it be, in obvious passing situations where he's spreading you out with 3 or 4 wide receivers, or they'll even do it in run heavy sets. They like to take shots down the field. They like to put their receivers in one-on-one matchups, try to scheme those guys open. And so this is a week where you're going to have to get pressure. And I feel like we'll get a good sense on what Joe Gillespie's philosophy is and maybe how it's changed from week one, if any, because he's brought more, 4, 5, 6-man pressures in the last few weeks. But Nicholls State didn't really have the personnel to try and do these things. And Houston either didn't try or just didn't execute well. But I would imagine that Rhett's looking at the tape of that Colorado game, and he's probably going to put athletes in the backfield, whether it's those running backs or wide receivers, and try to create one-on-one matchups with those linebackers and safeties, running them out of the backfield on, wheel routes, angle routes, rail routes, trying to get to the boundary, trying to exploit some of the lack of athleticism that this team has at the second and third level. And so we'll get a better sense of how TCU has adjusted and how they're trying to stop that. Back in 2019, I was like kind of going on a rabbit trail yesterday, trying to get a better sense of, what Rhett likes to do. And there was a breakdown of his offenses in 2019. There's a lot of TCU tape from that 2019 season, which, I get it. Like, it's totally different defense now. But you saw time after time, whether it was in the RPO game and just putting defenders in conflict, or it was, taking shots down the field, and they'll do it in run-heavy looks. They'll do it in more traditional air raid sets. But there is a constant pressure that they're trying to put on the defense. He is trying to create explosive plays. And so we'll get a good feel for how TCU is going to try to attack them, how they get pressure on Preston Stone. As I said, their O-line has held up pretty well this year so far, and how they cover these wide receivers and cover these athletes in the backfield, because this is a typical SMU team. They have good skill guys. They have a quarterback who can throw it around a little bit. Stone hasn't been the most accurate passer in his limited action, and that's something that Joe Gillespie tries to exploit. Like, if he wants the quarterback to make mistakes. He feels like most college QBs, if you sit back and allow them to make throws, they're going to give you some chances to make plays and maybe miss some opportunities just because, it's not the NFL. Like, not everybody on the field has a laser for an arm and is processing these things at warp speed. But you saw in the Colorado game, you saw a guy in Shadur Sanders who is a really, really good quarterback and some great wide receivers and a great running back in Dylan Edwards. And they use that speed and athleticism to their advantage. And they took advantage of the fact that there just wasn't a ton of, pressure in their face all the time, and use those athletes to make plays. And so we'll get a better sense for what they're doing defensively in this game against SMU. The other thing about SMU that stands out from a defensive standpoint, this is, a team that brought in a lot of transfers. They have 11 sacks on the year. And they get after the quarterback. They have been able to pressure the quarterback through their first few games of the season. Their leading sack guy is Elijah Roberts, defensive end, and he spent most of his career at Miami with the Hurricanes. Also at defensive tackle, they got Corey Robertson Jr., which, if you recognize that name, Corey was a player who TCU had interest in, defensive tackle from Oklahoma the last few seasons. He ended up picking SMU. He has 1.5 sacks on the year and has been getting pressure on the QB from that nose tackle position. Their leading tackler is Johnson McGill. who transferred in from Stanford. He's got 10 tackles on the year. Ahmad Walker and Kobe Wilson, their linebackers, both have 7 apiece. And so this is pretty talented defense. The thing that stands out to me the most, at least on paper, is typically with SMU, the advantage for TCU is up front. And I still think that's the case, but this looks like a more stout offensive and defensive line than you would generally see from SMU. They have experience and they have guys that, play at the Power 5 level and are getting an opportunity to get more playing time here for Rhett Lashlee's team. When we come back, wide receiver 1. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but is someone emerging? Is anyone going to emerge as the main playmaker for this offense? We'll talk about that next year at Locked On Horned Frogs. I do want to mention our friends at FanDuel right now, though. NFL season is in full swing, and they're still doing this deal. I don't know how much longer it's going to go on. It was really just to start the NFL season. We just finished up week 2. New customers, if you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and you put as little as $5 down, you can get up to $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. You can also get actually, it looks like that YouTube TV deal is done. So just $200 in bonus bets if you put $5 down. And it's really easy to use. The app is easy to use. You can bet on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 in bonus bets if you place a bet of $5. So yesterday I was talking about Amani Bailey and just how I think he's really the guy. Like when this offense is humming so far this year, he's the engine that makes it go with his ability to get chunk yardage in the run game. He's been so explosive. He's also done a good job of just getting positive yardage just about every time he touches the football. And one of our listeners, who I haven't heard from a while, and I was happy to hear from him, Byron Bailey. Byron, good to hear from you, man. He says, I think Flash can be the alpha. Chandler just does not push the ball down the field. And so he's talking about Jalen Robinson, which is a good name. And I like Jalen a lot. They've kind of used him in different ways. And we did see Chandler push the ball down the field more against Houston on Saturday. Maybe we'll see more of that as the season goes on. But you're right. I mean, he's not somebody that's going to throw a lot of those shots in one game. I did think that he showed some really good arm talent, though, in that football game with his ability to just rip the ball down the seam and put the ball on some guys in some tough situations. And so that was really encouraging. But, yeah, there's a lot of different options here as far as wide receivers goes. I mean, I think the guy that's going to lead the team in receptions is probably going to be J.P. Richardson. It just feels like Chandler's really comfortable, as you said, Byron, with more of the intermediate passing game. J.P.'s typically open. He's someone that's been reliable so far this season when he's been healthy. Has been available over the middle of the field. I still want to see more of Jared Wiley and Jack Bash. I just think those two guys are the two biggest mismatches from, a size and ability standpoint, and they're probably going to be most of the time covered by linebackers and safeties. And so I like that matchup with them going over the middle and making plays. But Jalen's really fast. I mean, they call him Flash, as you said, and he's a guy at UCF that had almost 1,000 yards in a COVID-shortened season. He was at Oklahoma. He's been at Ole Miss. So the talent's there. He's someone that Sonny Dykes has mentioned multiple times as somebody they got to get more involved in the offense. And so, yeah, I would love to see him emerge as the guy. And maybe like part of that too is just getting him more involved in some of the quick game stuff, like whether it's slants, bubble screens, and everybody kind of cringes at that. But with that speed, if you have the ability to get him out in space a little bit, and just get him more involved in the offense, that's a plus. And then hopefully off that action, you can take more shots down the field. I also really liked what I saw from Savion Williams. I thought it was his first game where he was really locked in. One thing Savion does well, and he's always done well, is block and be physical. And so you saw that featured, but you also just saw him be a big target. He had that catch in the end zone, which was a good throw by Chandler. And it was also a great, I don't know if you want to call it a contested catch, but it was one of the catches in that game that I think qualified, where he beats the corner, safety's coming over the top, he catches it as he's getting hit, He's able to hold on to the football. He also had like a couple catches on stop patterns and curl patterns. And that's something they did a lot with Quentin last season. And Quentin was really smooth with the ball in his hands and his ability to turn upfield and make plays. And I thought Savion looked pretty comfortable doing that too. That's not really his MO. That's not something that he's known for. In fact, most of what he did last year was a lot of the 50-50 ball stuff. And so I'd like to see more of that too. You talked about taking shots down the field with Jalen. I'm definitely interested in that, but also like let him go up and get the football from time to time. I mean, he's got that big size and ability. I just feel like that's his best asset. And so maybe that's something as the year goes on that they can integrate more into the offense. But right now it just feels like that receiver room. It's kind of like, this is not the best comparison, but Oklahoma State, they got 3 quarterbacks right now. And apparently, according to Mike Gundy, they're going to keep trotting those 3 guys out there for the foreseeable future, which is that's certainly a choice. It's not what I would do, but it's just what they got going on at the moment at Oklahoma State. And so it's that old adage of like, if you have 2 QBs, you don't really have any. Like if you have 3, you definitely don't have any. The idea that if you got multiple guys that, are trading snaps, and I know there's outliers, right? There's examples that have worked. But for the most part, there's a difference between having guys rotate series and having like a special package for someone. Like, yeah, Chris Leak and Tim Tebow made it work, but Tim Tebow was a glorified running back at the time who they could also do some cool things in the passing game with, and that was Chris Leak taking the majority of the snaps. It was a special package when Tebow would come in the game. Oklahoma did it with Blake Bell. That's not what Oklahoma State's doing. They're rotating quarterbacks in and out. And for all the talk this offseason about like this receiver room, and I'm guilty of buying into it as well, being deeper and more talented, that's all well and good, but it was clear, after the first month of the season or so, that Quentin Johnston was the dude, that he emerged as the guy who was going to be the main target down the field. If you needed a big catch on third down, whatever the case might be. And so they don't really have that right now, but as the year goes on, that could change. And I think somebody who's been banged up the last few weeks, who was better than I give him credit for in week 1 was Dalen Wright. I mean, I know a lot of our fans and listeners were super excited about Dalen when he ended up on the roster through the transfer portal. I wasn't scratching my head, but I was like, how much can you expect from a guy who didn't really put up a lot of numbers at Minnesota? But he had 2 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown in the Colorado game. And if Chandler is able to, throw an accurate ball and hit him at midfield in stride on that last drive, he probably puts him in field goal range and might have shook that tackle and taken it to the house. So they got some dudes. I think part of it is just getting everybody healthy and consistently playing, and then finding ways to get everybody involved in the offense. But I think you're totally right, Byron. Flash could be the guy that emerges. It's just about making sure that he gets opportunities and, that kind of builds through the season. I thought I had one more comment about the playmakers on offense. I guess I misplaced that, but we'll talk. Here it is. It's from CJ. I think at this point, Amani looks good. He looks like the most consistently dynamic player. Great flashes from Savion and JPR as well. I thought it was the best game that Savion played all year long, and JPR was healthy and looked good again. Made some nice catches over the middle where Chandler didn't put the ball exactly, right on him, and he was able to adjust and make plays. So there's talent in this receiver room. Again, it's just about finding ways to get everybody the football at the right time and in the right situation. And so that'll be something that builds through the year. And it's only week 4 coming up. But as some people have pointed out, week 4 last year was that Oklahoma game where they really took off. So maybe this is the week that things start to come together. Coming back home, 11 a.m. kick against SMU, Iron Skillet game. Maybe this is the game where we start to see the full identity of this offense come into focus. When we come back, some more questions and comments from the audience. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. All right, the Iron Skillet, it's a hot ticket this week. And if you need tickets from the secondary market, the best place to go is the Gametime app. I've told you about this before, whether it's football games, concerts, theater shows, whatever the case. Gametime app is the place to go for tickets. They have last-minute ticket sales, so even on a Tuesday here or if you're going to wait longer, procrastinate more, you can get these tickets on a Friday afternoon, maybe even a Saturday morning. They're sent directly to your phone, so you don't have to wonder about like, oh man, where did this go? Did I lose my tickets? Do I have to transfer them to my wallet? No, they just go directly to your phone. But cheapest tickets here on the Gametime app right now for this football game, $58. And that's a section 413 row X. Section 401 row Y, $66. One of the things I love about the Gametime app, it not only shows you, your seat, section, and number, but it gives you a picture of what your view of the field would be. And so it's just right there. You can see, okay, this is where I'm sitting. A flash deal right now, $120 for some lower end zone tickets. There's some good deals here. If you want to make sure you make it to the Iron Skillet game, there's only so many of these left before the two teams take a pause. Go to the Gametime app today, and if you download the Gametime app and use the promo code LOCKEDON, you get $20 off. So if you're sitting there like, man, $58, that's ridiculous. Well, use that promo code, get $20 off, and Gametime makes it easy for you. Again, they send it right to your phone. Gametime, official ticketing sponsor of the Locked On Network. Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Okay, before we go, I want to hit a couple more questions from the audience, just some audience reaction from the show on Monday. Richard Berry says, team looks to be building themselves through these games. Hopefully a wide receiver will make his presence known soon. I think they're definitely improving. I thought one thing that stood out to me, it wasn't like the execution wasn't perfect in the first half for TCU, especially on offense, but the first drive was really good, and I thought they came out with more effort and energy, and so that's been something that's been frustrating the first few weeks of the season. They just don't look like a team on a mission. I thought that was much better against Houston, and going on the road sometimes can help with that, and so hopefully they can bring that energy back to the Carter when they take it on SMU on Saturday. CCU is definitely still in the mix for a Big 12 championship this year. We're improving it every week. Not many other teams can say that. I think the ceiling is still really high for this team. They're going to have to get a lot better before the back end of that schedule, but that might be a blessing for this group is that they do play kind of a more manageable schedule at the start of the year. So hopefully by game 6 or 7, they're playing their best football, and when they hit that gauntlet of Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Baylor, they're in a much better place as a team, and they have, fully emerged and evolved as a unit. Tanner McKinney said he thought Trey Sanders would be the starter and Cook and Bailey would split runs. I still do think Cook could still rise and maybe beat out Sanders. Sanders is great in the red zone. Still looks like he is healing. Yeah, Trey. Trey has looked better the last few weeks. I know people were really hard on him after the Colorado game, even though he scored 2 touchdowns because of that lack of explosiveness. I think he's looked more agile and more explosive against the past 2 opponents. But, yeah, Cam Cook did get a carry late in that game against Houston, so we'll see how he comes along as the year goes on. I still really like Trent Battle, too. I know that the coaching staff doesn't seem to see him as a downhill runner, somebody they're just going to give a lot of carries to. But it just feels like he makes things happen when he gets the ball in his hands. He's shifty. He's a tough runner. I like the idea of getting him more opportunities, even if that's just with some swing passes each and every week. Craig says he's seeing improvement. If they can continue, they'll have something special, and he's a big fan of pushing the ball on the ground when the defense adjusts, then you can show up the passing game. I think that's, the function of this offense. Like, they want to run the football. They want to run the football effectively and then take shots down the field off of that action. And you saw some of that against Houston. Well, hopefully that'll continue to come together. Vincent Breyer says, can you please explain why teams say they are fast-paced and then they don't run a fast tempo? The scripted plays look quick, but then not so much. TCU looks like they could be deadly with back-to-back run plays, and then you can use play action off of that. I thought their tempo has been pretty fast this season, honestly, and that's something they talked about all offseason. I feel like sometimes they take themselves out of plays by just going too fast. Like, there's times where they get an explosive play down the field, and I understand the logic of, like, let's all get up to the line, put pressure on the defense, we'll run a play quickly again, they're not going to get set. But sometimes I'm like, man, if you just take a breath here and try to look at these matchups or get a good play call, then there could be more hay to be made. But, yeah, I agree. I think there needs to be more of a commitment to run the football That's something they've tried to do this year, but sometimes it's just at inopportune times. And then Zoom Play said Amani's a stud. Sanders is a beast too. He thinks they're going to punish linebackers and safeties this season. I think they could be a really good 1-2 punch. Again, it's just kind of about how those guys come along as the year continues to go on and as this team plays different matchups all season long. Tomorrow, we'll have Matt Jennings on the show. We'll also have Billy and Body from On3 later on in the week to preview this SMU game. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.